How's it going, people? Welcome in and get comfortable. It's time for my top 10 games of 2024. I've thought long and hard on this list, and I'm sure there will be people who disagree with it, but this is just my personal taste and what resonated with me the most in the last year. I will say at the top, yes, I am including expansions. If you want to see more of this content, please consider leaving a like and subscribe. And with that, let's get straight into it with number 10, Alan Wake 2: The Lake House, developed by Remedy Entertainment. Alan Wake 2 and Control are two games in my top games of all time, and The Lake House merged them together. The survival horror atmosphere and gameplay mechanics of Alan Wake 2 get smashed in with the lore of Control as you see this story from the perspective of Agent Estevez of the FBC. Remedy went full balls to the wall with the universe collision of these two games, but at its heart it tells a strong message about art and the destruction of AI. It has both horror and a good narrative experience, both of which I am very fond of. Sitting just above in 9th, this next game was probably my biggest surprise as I never play games like this. Unicorn Overlord, developed by Vanillaware. Fundamentally, at its core, Unicorn Overlord is a strategy game through and through. I never play strategy games, but after some real positive reception, I picked it up. Visually, it looks great. It has this painted animation style which really pops. Gameplay wise, I was really intimidated to start, but was relieved at how easy it was to pick up. The combat works in classic RTS style in that you create your units before the battle takes place, and then you strategically place them onto the battlefield. You can recruit loads of unique characters in this game, and they fall into one of the various classes. You have ground classes and flying classes, and then magic classes and support classes, and all the combinations you can think of. Each class has its strengths and weaknesses, and so you should utilize these when placing them on the battlefield, but the game always indicates to you a prediction of the outcome of the fight. Once one of your units meets an enemy unit, an animation will play out which takes you from top-down perspective to the standard 2D plane, and you can watch the outcome. You can of course skip this too, as you don't need to watch every fight play out, but it is always fun to see your units win, or on the other hand, it is useful to see what attacks your unit is struggling against. It has some really deep systems for those who love that kind of thing, where you can get into the weeds about when attacks should play out and when to bypass abilities and all that jazz. As a rookie player, I love that they didn't make it too hard for me to get by, and I had an amazing time all the way. On top of all this, it had a pretty engaging story, and that is important for me. Swinging in at number 8 is Dragon Age: The Veilguard, developed by BioWare. I can hear everyone's cries from here, but I'm not gonna lie, I really did like this game. I have to start by saying this was my first Dragon Age game, so I have no real love for the previous entries, which may have changed my outlook. But as a standalone game, The Veilguard was an amazing time. Firstly, the combat was so captivating. I played as a rogue, and it honestly was some of the best combat I have ever experienced. Second to only one game on this list. The arc and mechanics mixed in was a nice touch, and every single parry and perfect dodge brought a massive smile to my face. I loved getting into the nitty-gritty of the skill tree and honing my build on a fast, get-in, get-out neurotic-inducing maniac. I also loved the writing for Rook, and I really liked the person mine became. She had this amazing aura that just took hold of any room she entered. Some of the companions were great too, big shout out to Emmerich, and the cherry on top for me was the final act, which was just flawless. A completely epic and heartfelt end to tie the story up, which gave me Mass Effect flashbacks. Dragging us down into indescribable horrors, we have my 7th place pick, Senua's Saga: Hellblade 2, developed by Ninja Theory. Senua's Saga is the most impressive game I've ever touched in both its visuals and its audio. This game is much like the first, as it doesn't have much gameplay to it, but it is one hell of an experience. The narrative direction and Senua's drive to overcome every gruesome thing thrown her way takes us as a player on an unforgettable journey. Melina Juergen's performance as a title character is to be admired. It is truly something special. The puzzles are very much the same style as the original, but the combat has been upgraded ever so slightly. You will always feel like you are just scraping by. I will remember this game for some time to come. Just missing out on the top 5 is a game I think is criminally underrated and underplayed. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, developed by Ubisoft Montpellier. The Lost Crown is a Metroidvania and has some of the coolest abilities I can remember from any platformer. Because of these abilities, the platforming challenges are really creative with how you are supposed to navigate them. Plus, some of the challenge sections are incredibly difficult and can make you feel like an absolute god if you manage to get through them. The art style is different, but the fluid animations mixed in with a big splash of color works really well. The story is also surprisingly good for a Metroidvania, and the combat is equal measures challenging and fun to do. There were certainly some boss fights which took me a few tries. You have general upgrades like health, but there is also an amulet system which can give you various buffs. All in all, one of the best games I played in this genre, so you should definitely try it out. Now we're in the top 5, and these are the games that I really thought took it to the next level. Number 5, Dragon's Dogma 2, developed by Capcom. I never played Dragon's Dogma, but fantasy RPGs are very much up my street. I heard the first one was good, and I have all faith in Capcom to produce amazing games, so I wanted to give this a try. The story is a bit slow to start, but then becomes really intriguing and had me hooked. The pawn system is one of the most intuitive and impressive game mechanics I have ever seen. The exploration is in my favorite format, where you see things in the distance and head on over to see what secrets it holds. But above all of this, the thing Dragon's Dogma 2 does best is the combat. I can say hands down it is the best combat I have experienced this year. Big behemoth monsters you need to slay that you can just run into in the overworld. You can also scale them Shadow of the Colossus style, and the in-game systems work in a way that NPCs can help with the fight. Or maybe a monster will attack a town or village and then it turns into a protect the village type mission as opposed to just slaying a monster. Then you have the vocations, which is effectively classes. You have your standard sword and board, mage, archer and rogue, but then each go into slightly advanced roles, and then you also have some secret ones. New to this game was the Mystic Spearhand and Trickster, both of which were fun, especially the Mystic Spearhand, which was almost like a Jedi flipping about swinging a double-sided spear. My favorite though was the Sorcerer and the Magic Archer. The spell casting in this game is sensational. Standing back for a minute while you cast and seeing the spell build up, then wreaking havoc. Then imagine this with arrows intertwined. It was just the best thing ever. Coming in at number 4, we have an expansion to one of the best games ever made. Elden Ring: Shadow of the Erdtree, developed by From Software. This expansion is really beefy. About 40 hours I put into it, but really it's timeless. It could easily have been a standalone game. I can go on forever about what makes Elden Ring so amazing, with its exploration, its storytelling, its combat, its scale, the epic boss fights, the PvP, the build variety, the steep difficulty, and all of its secret areas. So just imagine that, but with more weapons, spells, bigger and tougher bosses, and lots more secrets and added lore, because that's what Shadow of the Erdtree is. An amazing expansion to an amazing game made by amazing developers. Now into the top 3, and where things really start to heat up. Dungeons of Hinterberg, developed by Microbird Games. My indie darling of the year, developed by a small Austrian studio, follows a law student Louisa trying to escape the monotony of a 9-to-5 in the Austrian Alps. A village called Hinterberg which has been washed with magic. The magic causes these gates to appear, and within the gates monsters and puzzles await. For such a small studio, it is incredibly impressive the amount of content this game has, and not just that, but all the little features it introduces. The in-depth combat has a light attack, a strong attack and a dodge roll, in addition to plenty of special abilities you can learn. The puzzles are challenging, and each area introduces its own magic ability that can be used in both combat and puzzle solving. There are even epic boss fights. Outside of this, you can spend your evenings building social bonds with your friends in town, or you can do activities that level up your social skills, both of which draw heavily from Persona. The art style is beautiful, as you can see from the B-roll here, and there were several breathtaking moments. I love this game, and I really hope to see more games like this in the indie space. The top 2 were the most difficult for me to place, and they are pretty inseparable, but one of them edged it out. In second place is Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, developed by Machine Games. I was not drawn in by the trailers for this game, but I wanted to give it a try anyway, especially as it was on Game Pass. I enjoy the films, but they are by no means my favorite. The Great Circle is by far the most entertaining piece of Indiana Jones content I have ever consumed. It draws gameplay elements from games like Dishonored, Uncharted, Uncharted and Tomb Raider, and everything works cohesively. I love punching Nazis in the face. I love bonking a fascist on the head with a saucepan down the back streets of the Vatican. I loved exploring the lost underground tombs of Egypt. I loved the whole cast of characters that were all voiced very well, and I loved the story. There is a smattering of linear levels which throw some amazing cinematic set pieces at you, and then there are also 3 open zone locations where you can really explore and feel like the famed archaeologist. It is also really funny in its dialogue, and I was laughing on many occasions. Machine Games have tried something completely different here from Wolfenstein, but I really hope they do sequels, as they have done just a top to bottom spectacular job. And now in at number 1, my game of the year for 2024. Metaphor ReFantazio, developed by Studio Zero and published by Atlas. Metaphor ReFantazio is developed by some of the creators from the Persona team, and it really shows. It borrows everything that is great from Persona, with the turn-based combat, the social links, the calendar system, the incredible soundtrack, and the personas themselves. The difference is it puts it in a fantasy medieval-like setting rather than the teenagers in high school. I think this is in part why I loved it so much, as this setting resonated with me miles more than a high school. The story is so nuanced and has many twists and turns, but never loses its direction. It has a massive payoff at the end and neatly ties everything together in a satisfying conclusion. All of the individual characters are incredibly written, and voice work is also top tier. On the combat side, it is less rigid than Persona and allows you and every member of your party to switch between any archetype you want, which allows much more freedom with strategy. It is snappy and fluid, and in my opinion, perfectly balanced. There are even some really tough optional fights if you want to challenge yourself. Metaphor is not just gorgeous with its art style, but the UIs and menus are the best I've ever seen. Every single layer of this game oozes cool. It is definitely worthy of the number 1 spot. And there you have it. Metaphor ReFantazio is my game of the year 2024. To recap the list, in 10 was Alan Wake 2 The Lake House, 9 Unicorn Overlord, 8 Dragon Age The Veilguard, 7 Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, 6 Prince of Persia The Lost Crown, 5 Dragon's Dogma 2, 4 Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, 3 Dungeons of Hinterberg, 2 Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, and in number 1 spot, Metaphor ReFantazio. I played 45 games in 2024 and I ranked every single one of them. If you want to check that out, please click the link here. If you enjoy the content, please consider leaving a like and subscribe, and for everything casual gamer, keep it here. Peace and love.